Lisa, a girl who had just turned 18, loved traveling and attending parties. One day, while flipping through an old family photo album, she stumbled upon a picture of Aunt Linda, smiling and celebrating with the family. It reminded her of how 4 years ago her mother and Aunt Linda had a heated argument, and since then, no one in the family had seen Aunt Linda. Aunt Linda, who was about 50 years old and still single, had been described by Lisa's mom as a kind, cheerful, and lovable person up until a few years ago. But then, in just 1 week, she became unrecognizable, moody, rude, and unlike her former self. After that, Aunt Linda disappeared from their lives. Now that Lisa was 18, she had the freedom to travel wherever she pleased. Determined to reconnect with her aunt, she decided to pay her a visit after all these years. She got in her car and set off. After about 6 hours of driving as night fell, Lisa finally arrived at Aunt Linda's house. It was a 2-story wooden structure surrounded by dense trees. The house appeared abandoned, with rusty iron bars covering the windows and vines growing through them. Despite its desolate appearance, Lisa held on to the hope that her aunt was inside. She approached the large front door and rang the bell. Moments later, she heard the sound of footsteps on creaky wooden floors approaching the door. When it opened, there stood Aunt Linda wearing her familiar smile. "Oh, my dear girl," she said warmly. "I knew that when everyone else abandoned me, you'd come back for me. Welcome, sweetheart." Relieved and happy to see her aunt, Lisa stepped inside and sat on a wooden chair as Aunt Linda went to fetch her a drink. Lisa glanced around the house. It looked exactly as she remembered it from her last visit years ago, but it was as though time had stood still. Dust and cobwebs covered everything, and the air was thick with the smell of damp wood. Some dishes were broken and left as they were, and Aunt Linda herself appeared to be wearing the same clothes from 4 years ago. As time passed, Lisa grew curious about why it was taking her aunt so long to bring the drinks. She decided to check the kitchen. The kitchen was at the end of a dimly lit hallway with 4 other doors, none of which looked like typical bedroom doors. As she walked down the hallway calling out for her aunt, she grew increasingly uneasy. When she got closer to the kitchen, she heard the sound of running water and clinking dishes, and she saw a shadow on the floor. Her aunt was there. Lisa relaxed for a moment, but before she reached the kitchen, a loud cry came from one of the partially open rooms in the hallway. Startled, Lisa turned toward the door. The room was pitch black, and the crying sound continued. She called out to her aunt, but there was no response, only the sound of sobbing. Hesitant yet drawn by curiosity, Lisa stepped closer. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the room, and she saw a woman resembling Aunt Linda sitting in a corner, hugging her knees and crying. Between sobs, the woman whispered, "I'm inside the wardrobe." Before Lisa could react, another flash of lightning revealed that the room was now empty. No woman, no crying. Confused and scared, Lisa heard Aunt Linda's voice calling her from the end of the hallway, saying, "Lisa, dear, where did you go? I've brought your drink." Lisa stepped out of the dark room and saw Aunt Linda standing at the end of the hallway, holding a tray of drinks. The light from the living room cast her shadow ominously, obscuring her face. As Lisa moved toward the living room, something caught her eye in another room. Through the open door, she spotted a wardrobe in the corner and smelled a foul stench emanating from it. On the floor, dark red and brown stains seemed to trail from the wardrobe. Lisa remembered the woman's words. "I'm inside the wardrobe." Overcome by fear and curiosity, Lisa hesitantly entered the room and approached the wardrobe. The closer she got, the stronger the stench became. She stood before the wardrobe, her hand trembling as she reached for the handle. With a deep breath, she opened it. What she saw made her scream in terror. Inside was a decayed corpse of a woman wearing the same clothes Aunt Linda had worn 4 years ago. Even the jewelry, her necklace and rings, were unmistakably Aunt Linda's. But if Aunt Linda's body was here, then who was the person in the living room? Lisa turned to run but froze in horror. Blocking the doorway was Aunt Linda, or something pretending to be her. Her eyes were pure white, her grin was twisted and menacing, and her bodice seemed to have doubled in size. With a guttural voice, the figure growled, "You invited yourself here, dear. Now you must stay with your loving aunt forever." Back at home, Lisa's mother heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Lisa had returned. Overjoyed, her mother hugged her tightly. "I was so worried about you. Why did you leave without telling me? I'm just glad you're back." But Lisa was no longer the cheerful, adventurous girl she once was. From that day on, she preferred solitude, snapped at everyone, and became bitter, just like Aunt Linda had been 4 years ago.